So, in today's lesson, we're going to look at one particular philosopher. His name is William James. He is in Component 1, Philosophy of Religion and Ethics. Within that, there is religious experience. So today we're going to be talking about religious experience. So a bit of an overview of who he is. He was a pioneering psychologist and a philosopher, and he is known to be the father of American psychology. So he wrote a very important book, which is this one over here, and it is called The Varieties of Religious Experience. So today we're going to cover the main points of what he talks about, what he says about religious experience in his book. So he's quite an interesting guy. He actually experimented with laughing gas. And he wanted to experience it for himself to understand basically a mystical or mysterious transcendent experience. And he is also known to be a pragmatist. So basically, he talks about fruits, not roots. So he doesn't really care about where a mystical experience comes from. What he really cares about is what happens after the mystical experience. So therefore, the fruits, the results, and not about the roots, the causes of the mystical experience. So in his book, he talks about 4 defining features of mystical experiences. So today we're going to cover the 4 features. The first one is ineffability, the second one is nomadic quality, the third one is transiency, and the fourth one is passivity. I'm going to explain each of them in sequence. So the picture here is basically Saint Bernadette. So this is where she had a mystical experience. It's called the grotto, and it's basically a black rock. And she said that she physically, with her physical eyes, saw the Virgin Mary. And so now this place is now a site of pilgrimage. A lot of people go there, they touch the black rock, and then they want to understand what Saint Bernadette's experience was. So the first feature of a mystical experience is ineffability. If you've been to church before, you might have heard of the story of how Saint Paul used to persecute Christians. And then on the way to Damascus, he was actually on the way to persecute even more Christians. He had a mystical experience. So this is a portrait, a painting of St. Paul on his way to Damascus going, he sees something, and then there was a transformation, and from then on he becomes an apostle. He doesn't persecute Christians anymore, obviously. So this is a quote from William James. The English is a little bit hard to understand, but I'm going to try and clarify it and explain it to you. So he says, the handiest of the marks by which I classify a state of mind as mystical is negative. So by negative, he means like ineffability. So in is like not explainable. Effable means like explainable. So it is not explainable. The subject of it immediately says that it defies expression. So you cannot express it. You cannot explain it. That no adequate report of its contents can be given in words. So basically, you cannot explain it, you cannot use words to describe it. So if you have a mystical experience, for example, St. Paul, it is very difficult to explain the experience with words. It follows from this that its quality must be directly experienced. So in order to understand it, you have to directly experience it. It cannot be imparted or transferred to others. So it's not as if I have an experience and then I'm just going to give it to you. I cannot express it in words. This isn't something that I can just simply give to you. In this peculiarity, mystical states are more like states of feeling than like states of intellect. So if it is a state of intellect, like for example, I can tell you how maths works. I can explain to you 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. I can explain how the process works. But let's say that I have a dream. okay, let's say I had a dream yesterday that I was Iron Man, then it's very difficult for me to explain to you what it feels like to be Iron Man, what the dream was about. So this is called basically a mystical experience, is that I cannot fully explain it, not like maths, not like something that is physical, and it is a state of feeling. So no one can make clear to another who has never had a certain feeling in what the quality or worth of it consists. So basically, if you have never had this experience, then it is very difficult for me to explain to you what it means. So for example, if you have never been to a concert before, if you've never listened to music before, someone somehow grew up in the jungle and he's never heard music before. It's just jungle noises. It's never been a symphony. It's never been music before. How do you explain to someone like that what music means? You can try to use words to explain what music means. You would say, well, there's tone, there's pitch, then the sound of violin sounds like this, the sound of a trombone sounds like this, and when in a symphony, the violin does this and the trombone does this. It's just really, really hard for me to explain with words what a symphony means. So let's continue and talk about the second feature of a mystical experience. So it has noetic quality. This quote over here is very important, so try to remember as much of it as possible. If you can, memorize it. It comes in very useful in your exam if you can give this quote. They are states of insight into depths of truth. So what is they? They means mystical experiences. So mystical experiences are states of insight into depths of truth. Basically, mystical experiences are states of insight, of understanding, and you understand truth, unplumbed by the discursive intellect. What is unplumbed? Okay, let's take a look at what a plumb is. So a plumb tool is basically like this, and it is used by a mechanic, by a carpenter to measure. So basically it goes vertically downwards. And then if you want to know if, let's say, this piece of wood is exactly vertical, this is a wall, and this is a piece of wood, and wants to know that this piece of wood is exactly vertical, then you would use a plumb tool to measure. If you put it down and then there's a line attached, and then you can see that it is like somewhat sideways, then you know that it is not completely vertical. Unplumbed basically means it is not tested, it is not measured with a plumb tool. So, mystical experiences are a state of insight into truth, and it is not measured with discursive intellect. So what does it mean by discursive intellect? So it is something that you can explain with words. So reasoning is discursive intellect. Maths is discursive intellect. This is a phone. I can describe to you. This is a phone, what it is used for, what it looks like. This is discursive intellect. But if it is something that I cannot really explain with words, like my dream or music or what it feels like to be in love, then that is called unplumbed by the discursive intellect. They are illuminations, revelations, full of significance and importance. So illumination means that it is something that is transcendent. So it is not mundane. It is not just like I had coffee. This is not an illumination. It is not revealing. It is not a revelation. A mystical experience is full of significance and importance. So it is basically important. It is not mundane or inarticulate. So this means that it cannot be expressed with words, even though they remain to be inexpressible with words. So it refers back to what we just said about how it is ineffable. And as a rule, they carry with them a curious sense of authority for after time. For after time just basically means like afterwards. So after the mystical experience, it's not as if like, oh, I had a dream. That's usually a dream, a normal dream. We would not call it a mystical experience. A mystical experience is something that carries significance after the dream. So if the dream actually affects you so much that you change the way you live your life, then maybe we can call it a mystical experience. So some mystical experiences actually come in the form of a dream. But if it is just a dream of like, oh, yesterday I dreamed that I was Iron Man, and if that's it, there's no significance, it's just like, interesting, I was Iron Man, I was flying around, then there's no significance basically. However, if I dream that I was Iron Man and then I wake up and decide I would like to be a billionaire, I'm going to pursue engineering. So I'm gonna study engineering, I'm going to try and earn a lot of money, and then I'm gonna save the world. And that is my career, that is my life goal, that is my vision. And from now on, I am going to do this. And it transforms my life. Then we can call it a noetic quality dream, a dream with noetic quality. So let's take a look at this word, noetic. So noetic comes from the Greek word noetikos, which means intellectual. So it has to do with perceiving or thinking. And then a way to remember what this word means is paranoia. We probably know what the word paranoia means. Para basically means abnormal. And then noia comes from the same word root as noetic. So noia means thinking, abnormal thinking, therefore paranoia. The third feature is transiency. So basically what this means is it is very short term. So you cannot have a mystical experience that lasts a very long time. So what he says, William James says, is that except in rare instances, half an hour or at most an hour or two. Often, when faded, their quality can but imperfectly be reproduced in memory. So after the mystical experience, you still remember it. It's not as if you come out of it and then you completely forget about the mystical experience. And when they recur, it is recognized. Sometimes mystical experiences would actually recur. So Bernadette actually had a vision of the Virgin Mary 18 times. So it actually recurs. And from one recurrence to another, it is susceptible of continuous development. So each time that it recurs, then there is a sense of continuous development. So the first time it is illuminating in this way. The second time you see the Virgin Mary, maybe you develop on your understanding of what you're supposed to understand. And then the third time, there's the development of understanding. Then the fourth feature is passivity. Although the oncoming of mystical states may be facilitated by preliminary voluntary operations, as by fixing the attention or going through certain bodily performances, or in other ways which manuals of mysticism prescribe. Okay, so let's take a look. You can try to induce a mystical experience. So by preliminary voluntary operation. So basically you out of your own initiative, do something. So William James himself actually tried to initiate a mystical experience by experimenting with laughing gas, as by fixing the attention. So another way of initiating a mystical experience is to fix the attention. So maybe you try to concentrate, and then you try to induce, you try to initiate a mystical experience. Or maybe you go through certain bodily performances, for example, experimenting with laughing gas. or in other ways which manuals of mysticism prescribe. So there are different types of mysticism, and different types of mysticism would have different ways of trying to initiate the mystical experience. So it could be through alcohol, through drugs, through laughing gas, maybe through meditation, through doing something with your body. You walk around in circles, whatever it is. You can try to initiate a mystical experience. The mystic feels as if his own will were in abeyance, and indeed sometimes as if he were grasped and held by a superior power. So even though you can try to start a mystical experience, once it starts, then you are you are completely passive in it. So it is as if something that is a superior being, a superior power, has completely taken control of you, and the mystic, the person who is going through the mystical experience, feels as if his own will were in abeyance. So basically, in abeyance means it is not being used. So my own will cannot be used. My own will is being stopped. I am getting controlled. I am being taken over by a superior power. Mystical states are never merely interruptive. So they definitely have importance. You remember it, it has importance, and it's going to have an effect on your later life. Some memory of their content always remains, and a profound sense of their importance. So there is memory of it, there's recollection of it, there is a sense of importance. They modify the inner life of the subject between the times of their recurrence. So a lot of times mystical experiences actually recur. So it's not as if like you go into a trance and then it interrupts your life. It's like, oh, whatever. The life continues. And then you go on to the next, and then it occurs again. It's like, oh, whatever. It continues. Life continues. So that is not a mystical experience. A mystical experience recurs a lot of times. It is important. You remember it after the experience, and the most important definition is that it has significance. It impacts you. It impacts your life, the inner life, your way of understanding the world from then on.